Tonight is the 30th of August 2011, and this is the fourth night. We are speaking on the Dhammapada. We come to chapter 15, Sukha Vaga, happiness chapter, verse 197. Happy indeed we live, friendly amidst the hostile. Amidst hostile people we dwell free from hatred. 98. Happy indeed we live, unafflicted amidst those afflicted. Amidst afflicted people we dwell free from affliction. 199. Happy indeed we live, free from avarice amidst the avaricious. Amidst avaricious people we dwell free from avarice. Verse 200. Happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. We shall be feeders on joy, like the radiant gods. So, if we are among hostile people, when people are hostile, they are hostile towards others, and the vipaka comes back to them. People are also hostile to them, so they have to suffer. But if we are not hostile, then we dwell free from hostility or hatred, then we are happy. Similarly, those who are afflicted by craving, so they are not happy, always being unsatisfied. But contentment is something independent of what we have outside. Contentment is a state of mind we have to cultivate. If we cultivate contentment, then even though people see that we have very few things, relatively poor, but we feel we have enough. They have found out from investigation that the happiest people in the world are not the richest. Many of the happiest people in the world are actually poor people, because they learn to be contented. They don't expect too much. And if people are avaricious, greedy, they also feel always discontent, unsatisfied. And this last one, verse 200, there is a sutta where the Buddha and his disciples, they went on Pindapata, arms round. And then this Mara possessed the lay people and induced the lay people not to give any food to the monks. So they came back empty-handed. Even though they came back empty-handed, the Buddha said, never mind, we shall be feeders of joy, like the radiant gods. These radiant gods are in the Abhasara heaven, is in the second jhana heaven, and there their state of mind gives them a lot of joy, so that every day they are exclaiming, oh happiness, like blissed out, more happy than on ecstasy pill, and for millions and millions of years. So the Buddha and his disciples, especially the Arahants, they are able to attain these jhana states. So they feel so happy in these states of jhana, they don't need to eat to feed their physical body. 201. Victory begets enmity. The defeated dwell in pain. Happily the peaceful live, discarding both victory and defeat. In this world, people always like to fight and win, even like games. You all know, recently there was a friendly basketball game in China, ended up fighting, that's not. So, as this verse says, victory begets enmity and the defeated dwell in pain. So if we don't fight with other people, we're not greedy for victory, then we don't challenge people. 202. There is no fire like lust, no crime like hatred. There is no ill like the aggregates, no bliss higher than the peace of Nibbana. So when there is lust, It's like a fire consumes us. And we don't know what we are doing. Even when somebody falls in love, they say smoke gets in your eyes. And this hatred, when there's a lot of hatred, we dare to do a lot of things because of hatred. Sometimes people kill. There's no ill, no suffering like the aggregates. These aggregates are the 5 aggregates. Body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, which is basically body and mind. It gives us a lot of suffering. And no bliss higher than the peace of Nibbana. The Buddha says, Nibbana paramang sukham. A lot of people don't understand how can Nibbana be so blissful, because Nibbana is a state where, or Parinibbana is a state where the 6 consciousness ceases. When the 6 consciousness ceases, there is no feeling. Yet the Buddha says it is the highest bliss. You can find this simile in our sleep. When we go to sleep, there are 2 types of sleep. One is the dreaming state. The other one is a very deep sleep where there is no dreams. So in the dreaming state, it's not so blissful, because in our dreams we get excited, sometimes we get fear, we think somebody is going to harm us. But in the deep sleep state, you have no, it's so deep that it's as though you have no awareness. So you don't even have awareness of yourself. Because there is no self in that deep sleep state. That's why it's so blissful. Whenever there's a self, we feel the need to protect the self. From the moment we are born until we die, we are struggling to protect the self, providing it with food, with shelter, free from harm and all that. So when there's no self in the deep sleep state, we are totally at ease. No need to protect ourselves. So that's why it's so blissful. So Nibbana is also like that. There's totally no self. 203. Hunger is the worst disease. Sankhara, volition, is the worst suffering. Knowing this as it really is, the wise realize Nibbana, the highest bliss. All beings have to eat, so when we are hungry, we feel so much suffering. And then volition is the worst suffering. What is this volition? Volition is exercising our will. You exercise your will when you want something, when you desire something. So moved by wants, by desires, by craving, we exercise volition. And when we exercise volition, the consequence leads to suffering. If you have nothing you desire, then there's no suffering. But because there's desire, so there's volition, and there is suffering. 204. Health is the highest gain, contentment the greatest wealth. A trustworthy person is the best kinsman, and Nibbana the highest bliss. This health is not the body health, it's more of the mental health. It's the highest gain. Contentment is the greatest wealth. If you are contented, you are like the richest man in the world. You don't need anything more. But if you are not contented, you might be a billionaire. A lot of billionaires in the world, they are not contented. They strive to be the top dog, the richest man in the world. So because they are always struggling, they are not contented. So they are not wealthy. But if you are contented, you are the wealthiest person in the world. You don't need anything anymore. The best kinsman is a trustworthy person, and Nibbana is the greatest bliss. 205. Having savored the taste of solitude and of peace, pain-free and stainless he becomes, drinking deep the taste of the bliss of the Dhamma. This taste of solitude, if you are not used to it, and if you are restless, You find solitude so unpleasant. But if you are the type of monk who likes to meditate and attain one-pointedness of mind, then you love solitude, and you drink the deep taste of Dhamma. 206. Good it is to see the noble ones, the Aryans. To live with them is ever blissful. One will always be happy by not encountering fools. 207. Indeed, one who moves in the company of fools grieves for a long time. Association with fools is ever painful, like partnership with an enemy. But happy is the association with the wise, like meeting one's own relatives. 208. Therefore, follow the noble one, the Arya, who is steadfast, wise, learned, dutiful, and devout. One should follow only such a person who is truly good and discerning, even as the moon follows the path of the stars. So it's good to associate with noble ones, Aryans, because Aryans, their conduct is comforting. If you live with the Arya, is not so greedy like a lot of worldly people. It doesn't have anger like worldly people. So it's pleasant company. But if you have to live with a fool, then because of his greed, hatred, and delusion, it causes pain to himself and causes pain and suffering to all around him. So it is wise to follow an Arya, person who knows the Dhamma, and then you can also learn the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. Chapter 16, Piya Vaga. Piya is affection. 209, giving himself to things to be shunned and not exerting himself where exertion is needed. A seeker after pleasures forsakes his own true welfare and will come to envy those intent upon their welfare. So a fool is one who unwholesome things he wants, and then not exerting himself where he should make effort, not making effort where he should make effort, wholesome actions. So if a person keeps seeking worldly pleasures, in the end he will envy those who practice the holy path, because those who practice the holy path will go to a good place, whereas those who seek after worldly pleasures will go to woeful plains of rebirth. 210. Seek no intimacy with the beloved, and also not with the unloved. For not to see the beloved and to see the unloved are both painful. 211. Therefore, hold nothing dear, for separation from the dear is painful. There are no bonds for those who have nothing beloved or unloved. These worldly people don't like to hear this. Seek no intimacy with the beloved. That means cut off this intimacy with those that you love, because they are the source of suffering later on. Now they are the source of happiness, but one day they will be the source of your suffering, because life is impermanent. Either they separate from you or you separate from them. So also is suffering to be with those that you don't love, your enemies also give you suffering. So those you love and those that you don't love, both of them give you pain. So that's why earlier we read about the Buddha encouraging monks to live alone, wander alone like the rhinoceros. Remember the Sutta Nipata. There are no bonds for those who have nothing beloved or unloved. So whether we like it or not, we have to let go, because in a few more years we will have to let go entirely, whether you like it or not. 212. From endearment springs grief, from endearment springs fear. For one who is wholly free from endearment, there is no grief. Whence then fear? 213. From affection springs grief. From affection springs fear. For one who is wholly free from affection, there is no grief. Whence then fear? 214. From enjoyment springs grief. From enjoyment springs fear. For one who is wholly free from enjoyment, there is no grief. Whence then fear? From lust springs grief. From lust springs fear. For one who is wholly free from lust, there is no grief. Whence then fear? 216. From craving springs grief. From craving springs fear. For one who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief. Whence then fear? So this 212. Those that are dear to you, grief arises when you have to separate from them. So because one day you fear separation from them, so you have fear that you will lose them. So when you really lose them, then you have grief. Even before losing them, you already have fear. So if there is nothing you hold dear, then there is no grief. What more to talk about fear? So in the same way, affection is the same. From enjoyment, those things that you enjoy, if you don't have them, then you have grief. And then you have fear because you are afraid you may lose it. Similarly, from lust, if you lust for someone, or you lust for your bottle of Scotch whiskey or what, then when you don't have it, you have grief. And similarly for craving. 217. People hold dear one who embodies virtue and insight, who is principled, has realized the truth, and who himself does what he ought to be doing. So a person who practices virtue and has insight or wisdom, who has principles and understands the truth of the Dhamma, then people value, people are inspired by such a person. 218. One who is intent upon the ineffable, that means Nibbana, and dwells with mind inspired by wisdom. Such a person, no more bound by sense pleasures, is called one bound upstream. If a person practices the Dhamma and then he gives up sensual pleasures, and such a one is bound for Nibbana, has entered the stream that will bring him to Nibbana. 219. When after a long absence, a man safely returns home from afar, his relatives, friends and well-wishers welcome him home on arrival. 220. As relatives welcome a dear one on arrival, even so his own good deeds will welcome the doer of good who has gone from this world to the next. So when we do wholesome actions, skillful actions, then after we pass away, this karma will welcome us in the next rebirth. For example, in heaven. Chapter 17, Koda Vaga, on anger. 221. One should give up anger, renounce pride, and overcome all fetters. Suffering never befalls him who clings not to mentality and materiality and is detached. This anger has very much to do with pride. When you have pride that you are somebody, and when somebody doesn't give you enough respect by maybe saying some words that you don't like to hear, then you get angry. And so if you get angry and then you do angry actions, then you will suffer for it. But you don't cling to mentality and materiality. This mentality and materiality means everything in the world. the mental part and the material part of the world. So if you don't cling to anything in the world and you are detached, then you have no reason to be angry. If you are attached to your ego, then it's easy to get angry. 222. One who checks rising anger as a charioteer checks a rolling chariot. Him I call a true charioteer. Others only hold the reins. Others only hold the reins. Reminds me of those who think mindfulness is enough. A lot of us, we are mindful, but we have no control. Even the person who commits adultery, as if he is not mindful that it is wrong. He knows it's wrong, but cannot tahan. So, as they say, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So it's not enough just to be mindful, just to know. You have to hold the reins, like here. Those arahants, even those the Buddha's disciples who have strong samadhi due to cultivating jhana, the Buddha says when they perceive something that is loathsome, if they want to, they can perceive it as attractive. And if they want to, they can perceive it as loathsome. And similarly, anything that is attractive, if the mind is strong enough, they can perceive it as attractive, or they can even perceive it as loathsome. This is holding the reins. This is not holding the reins, this is driving the chariot. But if you are just mindful, you are just holding the reins and the chariot is going all over the place, you have no control at all. So in the same way, if you are not in control, you cannot check your anger. You only know that you're angry, and your anger brings you to do unwholesome actions. And you know, and yet you cannot control yourself. So that's why it's important to have samadhi, to have a strong mind, so that you are the master of your mind. Yep. You're the master of your emotions, not the emotions, the master of you. 223. Overcome the angry by non-anger. Overcome the wicked by goodness. Overcome the miser by generosity. Overcome the liar by truth. So just as you cannot put out a flame with another flame, you have to put out a flame, a fire with water, the opposite. So in the same way, when you are in an angry situation, you have to use non-anger. When people are wicked to you, you have to be good to them. When people are miserly to you, you have to be generous. And you overcome lies by truth. 224. Speak the truth. Do not give way to anger. Give of your little to him that asks of you. By these three things, one may go to the realm of gods. So here is telling us always speak the truth. Secondly, don't get angry. Thirdly, practice generosity. Earlier we heard one sutta where the Buddha says, if only people knew the result of giving as I do, the Buddha said, they would not be stingy. They would not even eat the last bit of food they have without sharing with others. But it's because people don't know the result of giving, therefore they are stingy. So that's why here it says, give of your little to him that asks of you. Even if you have little, people ask, also you should share. So if you do these three things, you have a very good chance of going to heaven. Those things that are hard to do, you can do, that is meritorious. Those things that are easy to do, is not meritorious. 225. Those sages who are inoffensive and ever restrained in body go to the deathless state, where they grieve no more. So those who practice the Dhamma, they do not offend people, and they are restrained in their conduct. So they go to the deathless state, attain liberation. 226. Those who are ever vigilant, who discipline themselves day and night, ever intent upon Nibbana, their asavas fade away. These asavas, you can translate it as uncontrolled mental outflows. Uncontrolled mental outflows. Your defilements are also uncontrolled mental outflows. Your consciousness is also uncontrolled mental outflows. So those who practice the path to Nibbana, they discipline themselves day and night. In other words, they don't sleep like ordinary people sleep. 227. O Atula, indeed this is an old pattern, not one only of today. They blame one who remains silent. They blame one who speaks much. They blame one who speaks in moderation. There is none in this world who is not blamed. 228. There never was, there never will be, nor is there now, a person who is wholly blamed or wholly praised. The world is such, when you keep quiet, also people will criticize you. You talk too much, also people will criticize you. You speak in moderation, also you are not free from criticism. So life is like that. So don't be moved by what people say. The Buddha says, if foolish people pass comments, you let it go in one ear and go out the other. What's the point of getting annoyed? If you get annoyed, you get angry, then you are keeping his words in your brain, in your mind. But these rubbish words, why do you want to keep in your mind? Just throw it out. But if a wise man says something to you, then you retain it. Think about it. So he's a foolish man. Don't just ignore those silly comments that silly people make. 229 to 230. But as to the person whom the wise praise, after observing him day after day, one of flawless character, wise, and endowed with knowledge and virtue, who can blame such a one as worthy as a coin of refined gold? Even the gods praise him. By Brahma too is he praised. So if a person is of flawless character, endowed with knowledge and virtuous conduct, even the gods will praise such a person. From the suttas we find that these devas and devis, they seem to be quite aware of what is happening in the world. 231. One should guard oneself against irritability in bodily action. One should be controlled in deed. Having abandoned bodily misconduct, one should practice good conduct in deed. 232. One should guard oneself against irritability in speech. One should be controlled in speech. Having abandoned verbal misconduct, one should practice good conduct in speech. 233. One should guard oneself against irritability in thought. One should be controlled in thought. Having abandoned mental misconduct, one should practice good conduct in thought. 234. The wise are controlled in bodily deeds, controlled in speech, and controlled in thought. They are truly well controlled. So how to control yourself? It's very important to have some samadhi. If you don't have samadhi, then your emotions easily move you. But the Buddha says, if you have some samadhi, then you are as solid as a rock. When a big wind blows, a big storm blows, it can never shake the rock. So in the same way, if your mind is strong, then we are not moved by emotions, we are not irritable. A lot of people are easily irritated. So if you are easily irritated, then your emotions are not under control. then you can act wrongly to your body, to your speech, and to your mind. To not to be irritated so easily. Firstly, we have to understand the Dhamma. Secondly, we have to cultivate some Samadhi so that our mind is more tranquil. When our mind is tranquil, it's not easily shaken. Chapter 18, Mala Vaga, impurity. 213.5. Like a withered leaf are you now. Death's messengers are waiting for you. You stand on the eve of your departure, yet you have made no provision for your journey. 236. Make an island for yourself. Strive hard and become wise. Rid of impurities and cleansed of stain, you shall enter the celestial abode of the noble ones. So, all of us are like this withered leaf. Don't think you are young, that death is so far away, because graves have a lot of young people. So the Buddha says that we have cancer. A lot of people, when the doctor tells you that you have cancer, then you are very upset. Why are you upset? Because you are going to die. But you should know that everybody has to die. If you know that everybody has to die and you have to die, then you prepare for it. And if you are prepared, then any time death comes, you don't be so scared, won't be so disappointed. A lot of people, when they know they have cancer, they say, why me, why me? Why do you ask, why me? Everybody also has to die. Basically, we die not because we have cancer. We die because we are born. The fact that we are born means that we have to die. And the Buddha says all of us have cancer. Having cancer means you don't know when you are going to die. Even the doctor, when the doctor tells you that you have cancer, the doctor doesn't know when you are going to die. The only doctor the doctor can say only within 1 year or within 6 months. Then also is not sure. Some people, the doctor say within 1 year or within 6 months, that person lives another 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. So there's no certainty. So we have to prepare. We have to prepare as though death may come tomorrow. Don't be careless. If you're careless, then when death comes, you become very frightened, very disappointed. So here it says, make an island for yourself. Strive hard, make effort, become wise by learning the Dhamma. Keep your sila. Sila is extremely important. People go to the woeful plains mainly because of sila, not keeping enough good sila. So when we keep sila, we get rid of our impurities. 237. Your life has come to an end now. You are setting forth into the presence of Yama, the king of death. No resting place is there for you on the way. Yet you have made no provision for your journey. 238. Make an island for yourself. Strive hard and become wise. Rid of impurities and cleanse of stain. You shall not come again to birth and decay. So we have to make provision for the journey. All of us one day will have to go on this journey in samsara. In fact, the Buddha says, we have been dying and taking rebirth, countless times. So many times, and yet we don't remember. So it's nothing new. So we should be more experienced. After being on samsara for so long, if we still don't prepare ourselves, we are a big fool. 239. One by one, little by little, moment by moment, a wise man should remove his own impurities, as a smith removes the dross of silver. So when we understand the Dhamma, we cultivate a skillful life. The skillful life means removing your unskillful actions, your unskillful habits, your unwholesome habits and actions, and then slowly you cultivate skillful or wholesome actions. Then you remove your impurities, like the smith removes the dross of silver. 240. Just as rust arising from iron eats away the base from which it has arisen, even so their own deeds lead transgressors to a state of woe. So when we do unwholesome deeds, it eats us away like the rust, and it will bring us to states of woe. 241. Non-repetition is the bane of scriptures. The bane means the curse, the cause of ruin. So non-repetition is the bane or curse of scriptures. Neglect is the bane of a home. Slovenliness is the bane of personal appearance. Heedlessness is the bane of a watchman. So when we learn the scriptures, the Dhamma, the Suttas, we should repeat it. During the Buddha's days, they had no books, so they had to repeat the Suttas constantly. But for us nowadays, we have the books, so you don't have to repeat, but you have to read them again and again. Or if you don't want to read them, then you listen to those CDs which contain the suttas. Like these Nikayas, we have 5 Nikayas in our Pali canon. These 5 collections of discourses of the Buddha. I've already spoken all of them in English. The first one I spoke was Anguttara Nikaya in the years 1997 and 1998. And then the next one was Sangyutta Nikaya in the year 209. And then after that, Majjhima Nikaya in the year 2010. And this year, 2011, I've completed the Digha Nikaya, and now we are completing the Khuddaka Nikaya. So all these Nikayas, all these suttas are available in English. So you just have to listen to them again and again and again and again. There's no end to listening to the suttas, because the more times we listen, the more we understand. Okay. 242. Unchastity is the taint in a woman. Niggardliness or stinginess is the taint in a giver. Taints indeed are evil things, both in this world and the next. 243. A worse taint than these is ignorance, the worst of all taints. Destroy this one taint and become stainless, O monks. This taint is a blemish, something that makes you dirty. So the worst stain in the world is ignorance. What is this ignorance? Ignorance means here the ignorance of the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings. Because if you understand the Buddha's teachings, you have entered the stream. In the Majjhima Nikaya, it is said to attain right view, only 2 conditions are required. One is the voice of another teaching you the Dhamma, and the second condition is proper attention. So when you listen to the Dhamma, you must pay proper attention. In that way you can understand the Dhamma. And when you have understood the Dhamma, you have attained the vision of the Dhamma, Dhammacakku. And that means you have entered the stream, you have become an Arya, the first path. And after some time, the first path will turn into the first fruit. The latest is by the time you die, you would have attained the first fruit, Sotapanna. In which case, you will never be reborn into the woeful plains. You will never be reborn as a ghost, or as an animal, or in hell. And then you are secure already, no more afraid of samsara. We read in the previous verse that better than becoming the king of the whole world, better than becoming the king in heaven, is the attainment of stream entry. There's nothing more valuable in life we can get than to understand the Dhamma and attain stream entry and become an Arya. 244. Easy is life for the shameless one, who is as impudent as a crow, backbiting and forward, arrogant and corrupt. 245. Difficult is life for the modest one, who always seeks purity, who is detached and unassuming, clean in life and discerning. In the world, we find a lot of shameless people who are arrogant, backbiting, corrupt, and all that. These people, it's easy. This verse says it's easy to be like that. Why? Because those are our natural tendencies. Our natural tendency is towards greed, hatred, and delusion. But to do the opposite, to be a modest person always looks inside of himself. It's a shame to do unwholesome deeds. So because he's ashamed he has a sense of shame and is afraid of wrongdoing. So he is always modest. Modest means not careless, always holding back from doing evil, because he's always seeking purity and detached and unassuming. This is difficult to do, and because it is difficult to do, it is meritorious. 246 to 247. One who destroys life, utters lies, takes what is not given, goes to another man's wife, and is addicted to intoxicating drinks. Such a man digs up his own root even in this very world. So if a person breaks all the 5 precepts, he digs up his own root. What do you mean by digging up your own root? That means you are killing yourself, doing the worst you can do. Because by breaking these 5 precepts, if a person has a habit of breaking these 5 precepts, is doomed to the woeful states of rebirth. 248. Know this, good man, those of evil character are uncontrolled. Let not greed and wickedness drag you to protracted misery. So the Buddha here says, people of evil character are uncontrolled. Uncontrolled means they give way to their tendencies, give way to their passions, give way to their emotions, give way to their weaknesses. Then they go for rebirth for a long time in misery. Protracted misery means a long time in misery. 249. People give according to their faith, according to their trust. If one becomes discontented with the food and drink given by others, one does not attain meditative absorption, either by day or by night. 250. But he in whom this discontent is fully destroyed, uprooted and extinct, he attains absorption, whether by day or by night. For a monk, because we beg for our food, or even if we don't beg for our food, we are dependent on lay people for our food. So we cannot be choosy about our food. If a person wants to be choosy about his food, he cannot wear the robes. He cannot become a monk. When we wear the robe, we already make a determination that we will not have money to use, that our priority is to practice the spiritual path. So if a monk is fussy about his food, then he cannot attain this meditative absorption. His mind cannot settle down because he's unhappy over this food, he's unhappy over that drink and all that. But if we are not fussy, then we are happy, and happiness can bring us into concentration. 251. There is no fire like lust. There is no grip like hatred. There is no net like delusion. There is no river like craving. When we have lust, it burns us like a fire. We are out of control. There's no grip like hatred. When we have hatred, it grips us and we do unwholesome actions for which we regret later. There's no net like delusion. We are caught in delusion like a net and hard to get out of it. No river like craving. Craving flows. If you allow your craving, you can easily crave for many things. 252. Easily seen are the faults of others, but one's own are difficult to see. Like chaff, one knows another's faults, but hides one's own, even as a crafty fowler hides behind sham branches. So a lot of people like that, we like to hide our faults, but we like to expose other people's faults. But we must always remember that we can never hide our faults. Why? Because even humans don't know. All the devas and devis will know your faults. All the ghosts will know your faults. 253. He who seeks another's faults, who is ever censorious, his asavas grow. He is far from the destruction of the asavas. So if we keep looking at other people's faults, our defilements, our uncontrolled mental outflows will be flowing non-stop. So we cannot destroy these outflows. 254. There is no track in the sky and no recluse outside. Humankind delights in worldliness, but the Buddhas are free from worldliness. 255. There is no track in the sky and no recluse outside. There are no volitions that is eternal. There is no volition that is eternal, and no instability in the Buddhas. So there is no recluse, no real recluse, no real monk outside the Buddha's teachings. That means the Noble Eightfold Path. Outside the Noble Eightfold Path, you cannot find an Arya. Worldly people delight in worldliness, but the Buddhas, the Arahants, are free from worldliness. These volitions, sankhara, are impermanent. Sabbe sankhara anicchati. This one, people like to say conditioned things, but my personal opinion, this word sankhara refers to volition, the exercise of the will. You notice in the Noble Eightfold Path, in the dependent 12 links of dependent origination, avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññāṇaṃ, viññāṇa paccaya nama rūpaṃ. So because of ignorance, we have volitions. Volitions means exercising your will. And ultimately, it is the will to live. So because of ignorance, we always want this, we want that. We are moved by desires, so we exercise volition, exercise our will. And when we exercise our will, consciousness comes into being. And this consciousness has a counterpart. Vijnana always comes together with nama rupa. Vijnana is consciousness, and consciousness, when we have the sixth consciousness, we must always have an object of the sixth consciousness. So the object of the sixth consciousness is nama rupa, phenomena. And this object of the sixth consciousness has two parts. One is nama, which is mentality. The other is rupa, the physical, physicality or materiality. So this mentality and materiality, nama rupa, is basically the whole world, the whole universe. So when consciousness arises, then you are conscious of the whole world. And this whole world has two parts. One is the mental part, your mind, other people's mind, other beings' mind. That is the mental part. The physical part is the physical world. So when we exercise volition, volition creates the world. And because volition is this sankhara, volition is impermanent. The result of sankhara, the world, is even more impermanent. So just like a shadow depends on so many conditions. A shadow depends on the sun, depends on the tree or a form. So because the conditions for the shadow, the sun and the form are impermanent, so the shadow is even more impermanent. So the world depends on volition. So because volition is impermanent, then the world is even more impermanent. Everything in the world. So there are no volitions that are permanent, which means that nothing in the world is permanent. Now we come to chapter 19, Dhammapada, concerning Dhamma, 256 to 257. Not by passing arbitrary judgments does one become just. A wise person who investigates both right and wrong, who does not judge others arbitrarily, but passes judgment impartially according to truth, a sagacious guardian of the law or of the Dhamma, is called just. So when we judge, we investigate properly. We don't simply decide. Sometimes people like to judge other people based on short acquaintance. Sometimes even they hear what people say about somebody else and then they pass judgment. That's very dangerous. The Buddha says to know a person, you have to associate with a person for a long time. And then you have to be very sharp. You're very sharp at noticing things. Then only you know actually his real self, his heart. 258. One is not wise because one speaks much. One who is peaceable, friendly and fearless is called wise. So it's not always one who cakap is a wise person. 259. One who is not versed in the Dhamma because one speaks much. One who, after hearing even a little Dhamma, does not neglect it, but personally realizes its truth, is truly versed in the Dhamma. So just because you can quote the Dhamma, it doesn't mean you know much. But if you practice the Dhamma, you understand the Dhamma, then you really know the Dhamma. There's one sutta where the Buddha says, a speaker of Dhamma. What do you mean by a speaker of Dhamma? A speaker of Dhamma is one who talks about suffering, the origin of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the path leading to the ending of suffering. Sometimes some so-called Dhamma preachers, they like to tell stories, they like to tell jokes and all that. And people enjoy the talk because it's amusing. So if you go by what the Buddha says, that is not a Dhamma preacher. The Dhamma preacher is one who preaches the Dhamma for the ending of suffering. 260. A monk is not an elder because his head is grey. He is but ripe in age, and is called one grown old in vain. 261. One in whom there is truthfulness and virtue, inoffensiveness, restraint and self-mastery, who is free from defilements and vice. He is truly called an elder. So a Thera, an elder, is so called not because he is old, but because he is wise in the Dhamma, practices the Dhamma. 262. Not by mere eloquence, nor by bodily beauty, does a person become refined. Should he be jealous, selfish, and deceitful? 263. But he in whom these are wholly destroyed, uprooted and extinct, and who has cast out imperfection, that sagacious person is said to be refined. So a person considered to be refined has got rid of unwholesome habits and got rid of unwholesome conduct. 264. Not by shaven head does one who is undisciplined and untruthful become a recluse or samana. How can one who is full of desire and greed be a recluse? 265. One who wholly subdues evil, both small and great, is called a recluse because he has overcome all evil. So a person who wears the robe and is undisciplined is not fit to be called a monk because of his desire and greed and anger and hatred, and delusion. But if a monk he has overcome these unwholesome states, then he is truly a monk. 266. He is not a monk just because he lives on others' arms. Not by adopting outward form does one become a true monk. 267. But one who lives the holy life and walks with understanding in this world, transcending both merit and demerit, he is truly called a monk. So a monk is not a monk because of the outward form, because he wears a robe, begs for his food and all that. But if he truly practices the way for liberation, a monk who is seriously practicing the way for liberation is not so much concerned with merit and demerit, but is practicing to end suffering. 268 to 269. Not by observing silence does one become a sage. If one is foolish and ignorant, but that wise person who, as if holding a balanced scale, accepts only the good and rejects the evil, he is truly a sage, since he comprehends both worlds, the present and the future. He is called a sage. So, a sage, a wise person, is one who practices the good and rejects evil or unwholesome conduct. 270. He is not a noble one who injures living beings. He is called a noble one because he is harmless towards all living beings. Person who practices the holy path should have a lot of loving kindness and not harm other beings. 271 to 272. Not with mere rules and observances, nor even with much learning, nor with the gain of absorption, nor with a life of seclusion, nor with thinking, I enjoy the bliss of renunciation, which is not experienced by the worldling. Should you rest content, O monks, as long as the utter destruction of the asavas has not been reached. So this verse is more for monks. Buddha says, even you practice the sila and the monastery observances, even if you know much Dhamma and you can attain jhana, that is still not enough. Buddha wants the monks to strive for the liberation, total liberation. One more. Chapter 20, Magga, Vagga. Magga is a path. 273. Of all paths, the Eightfold Path is the best. Of all truths, the Four Noble Truths are the best. Of all states, passionlessness is the best. Of all humans, the Seeing One, the Buddha, is the best. 274. This is the only way. There is none other for the purification of insight. Tread this path and you will bewilder Mara. 275. Walking upon this path, you will make an end of suffering. Having discovered how to pull out the thorn of lust, I expound the path. 276. You yourselves must strive. The Tathagatas only point the way. Those meditative ones who tread the path are released from the bonds of Mara. So this is talking about the Noble Eightfold Path. It's the best of all paths. And of all states, passionlessness is the best. Free of passion. Passions refers to lust as well as anger. This last part is quite important. You yourselves must strive. The Tathagatas only point the way. So the Buddha only teaches us the path. It is up to us to strive. Nobody can help us except ourselves. And the Dhamma. That's why there's one important saying of the Buddha. Be a lamb unto yourselves. Be a refuge unto yourselves with no other refuge. Take the Dhamma as your lamb. Take the Dhamma as your refuge with no other refuge. So nobody can help us except ourselves. And nothing can help us except the Dhamma. So we must learn the original Dhamma of the Buddha found in the Nikayas and put effort. Always remember life is short. 277. All volitions are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. 278. All volitions are unsatisfactory or suffering. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. 279. All states are not self. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. Sabbe sankhara anicchati. This one, as I mentioned just now, all volitions are impermanent. And volitions is the condition, sankhara is the condition for the world to arise. So because sankhara is impermanent, the world, everything in the world is even more impermanent. And all volitions are suffering because the result of volitions, the world is suffering itself. Everything in the world is a cause of suffering. If we cling to it, it gives us happiness only for a short while, and later that happiness turns to suffering. And this world is always a world of, always two-sided. Because if you have happiness, you must have suffering. If you have white, you must have black. If you have short, you must have tall. This last part, Sabbe Dhamma Anattati. Sometimes people like to translate Dhamma as mental states. But this Dhamma, in my opinion, is not only mental states, but also physical states. This Dhamma refers to that Nama Rupa. Nama Rupa, everything in this world, all these states in the world, Nama Rupa, as the physical part and the mental part, are not self. In other words, there's nothing in the world that is Atta. Atta means something, this self means something that is permanent, that will never change, that has a core. But everything in the world, there is no core. Everything is changing. Everything is in a state of flux. We think this body is so real. We think there is a self in this body. But when we examine the body is made up of cells. And all the cells are like foam. The Buddha says this body is just like foam. When you see a lump of foam, consists of bubbles, and these bubbles arise and burst, arise and burst. Just like when you wash your clothes, you put a lot of fab, and you start to shake your clothes, you see a lot of foam form. And you can see this foam, there's no core in that foam. There's no essence, there's no something solid that is unchanging. All the bubbles, they last only a short while and then they burst. So in the same way, our whole body, even though it looks so solid, so real, consists of cells. And all these cells in our body, is just like the bubbles in the foam. They last for a short while and then they die. last for a short while and die. And according to science, every 7 years, all the cells in our body would have changed. So every 7 years we get a new body. We are like a bionic man. Because of this, there is no atta, no self. That's why it says sabbe dhamma anattati. Nothing in the world has a self, has a core, has an essence. Sometimes people like to translate this atta as soul. It's not soul. It's not soul. Soul, in the Christian sense, there is no soul, like what the Christians say, because in the Christian sense, a soul is something that is permanent, is everlasting. But the Buddhist soul is different. The Buddhist soul is something that is impermanent, also a flux of energy. It's because the people who follow the Abhidhamma, they say that there is no soul, so they believe that when a being dies, nothing leaves his body. When the being dies here and takes rebirth in the womb, they say the consciousness in this human body stops. And then the consciousness starts in the womb. But that's not what the Buddha said. The Buddha says that there is a soul, that when we die, the soul comes out of the body and enters the womb. But it does not enter the womb immediately. It has to wait for conditions. What is the condition? Mother and father must come together. Secondly, mother must be in the right season, fertile. Then the egg is fertilized. Then this, in the suttas, is called a gandhabba. In later books, it's called an intermediate body. This gandhabba or intermediate body waits for the time to enter the womb. Then it physically enters the womb and then lodges itself there, and a new being is born, is created, a fetus. So that is what the sutta says, very different from what the Abhidhamma says. So we must always be very careful about later books. Later books, they mix some Dhamma with our Dhamma. So the only books that we can trust are the early discourses of the Buddha. I always reiterate, I always say that the Buddha already informed us that the true Dhamma will last 500 years. So for the 500 years after the Buddha passed away, we had the true Dhamma, the real Dhamma. And during this time, when the people practiced the real Dhamma, there were no Buddha statues. Nobody prayed to Buddha statues. Only 500 years later, in Gandhara, in India, they started to make Buddha statues. So during this period of 500 years after the Buddha passed away, during Emperor Asoka's time, he made these stone pillars, and he got the workers to carve on these stone pillars the discourses of the Buddha. And now they dig up these stone pillars. We know that the original suttas during the Emperor Asoka's time consists of 5 Nikayas. No Abhidhamma, no commentaries, no Mahayana books. Only the 5 Nikayas, the 5 Pali Nikayas as we have them now. That is original Buddhism. So don't trust other books, only these 5 Nikayas. But even then, the Khuddaka Nikaya has a lot of additions, so you have to differentiate also. 200 and okay. So now, so when one understands that all volitions are impermanent, then we understand the world is impermanent, Dhammas are impermanent, and all volitions are suffering because the result of volitions is the world which is suffering. And all states, mentality and materiality, everything in the world has no core, no atta, no self. 280. The idler who does not exert himself when he should, who though young and strong is full of sloth or laziness, with a mind full of vain thoughts, such an indolent man does not find the path to wisdom. A lot of people, when we are young, we think we have a lot of time. We don't expect death to come. For some people, death comes very fast. Just 2 days ago, somebody was telling me, somebody here was telling me that the colleague, 31 years old, just gave birth to a baby, suddenly found she has got cancer all over the body. Who would expect a young girl, 31 years old, and get cancer, so serious cancer? 281. Watchful of speech, well controlled in mind, one should not commit evil with the body. Let one purify these 3 causes of action and win the path made known by the great sage. So we should be controlled in body, speech and mind. And don't be lazy, as the previous verse says. Don't think that we have time because we have cancer, we don't know when we are going to die. 282. Wisdom springs from meditation. Without meditation, wisdom wanes. Having known these 2 paths of progress and decline, one should so conduct oneself that wisdom increases. So if you want to have a clear mind, we must meditate according to the Buddha's method. What is the Buddha's method of meditation? In the Majjhima Nikaya, Venerable Ananda was asked, what type of meditation is praised by the Buddha? And what did he say? He didn't say vipassana meditation. He said the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. The 4 jhanas, only the 4 jhanas is the Buddha's meditation. If you practice any meditation and it does not lead to the 4 jhanas, that is not the Buddha's meditation. This is very clear from the Majjhima Nikaya. So why is it that meditation leads you to wisdom? Because the Buddha's meditation is the jhanas. And the jhanas means when you attain even the first jhana, the 5 hindrances are eliminated. And it's not eliminated only in the jhana, even outside of the jhana is eliminated. We saw this from the Digha Nikaya. All the similes given when a person attains the abandonment of the hindrances. It was described like a person freed from the prison, like a man in debt, freed from his debt, and all that. So the abandonment of the defilements is permanent. But even though it's permanent, abandonment of the defilements, the 5 hindrances, not defilements, the 5 hindrances, it does not mean they are totally eliminated. That means not even a little bit of it. They are called hindrances when they are strong and obsess our mind. And they obsess our mind, sensual desire, ill will or anger, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt. These 5 things, when they are strong, they are called hindrances. When we attain the jhanas, they are reduced to a very low extent. When they are reduced to a low extent, they don't hinder us anymore, so they are not called hindrances. They are only totally eliminated by the Arahant, because the Arahant has pulled out the roots of the 5 hindrances, so they are totally eliminated. For other people, they are not totally eliminated. They are just cut down to such a low extent that they are no more called hindrances. That's why if you meditate the Buddha's way, the samatha meditation, and then your hindrances are reduced, then you can see and know things as they really are. Yatta Buddha Jnana Dasana, the Buddha says, knowing and seeing things as they really are. There's only one condition, and that one condition is the Samadhi, attainment of Samadhi, where the 5 hindrances are eliminated. 283. Cut down the forest, but not the tree. From the forest springs fear. Having cut down the forest and the underbrush, be passionless, O monks. What do you mean by cut down the forest but not the trees? It's just like if a person is bitten by a snake, and you want to remove the poison, because the poison will kill that man if the poison is not removed. Even you have to cut off your arm, you cut off your arm to save the life, but you don't kill the man. As they say, don't throw away the bath water with the baby in it. So when we cut the forest of our defilements, we don't kill the self. There was one case, it might sound a bit coarse, but I'll quote to you from the Vinaya books. There was one monk, he was troubled very much by lust. So much trouble by lust that he couldn't stand it. What did he do? He cut off his sexual organ. So when the Buddha heard of it, the Buddha said, that foolish man, he cut off one thing when he should have cut off another thing. So here it is the cut down the forest, but not the tree. 284. For so long as the underbrush of desire, even the most subtle of a man towards a woman, is not cut down, his mind is in bondage, like the suckling calf to its mother. This desire, this lust, is extremely hard to cut. So especially for the opposite sex. That's why samatha meditation is so important. When we practice samatha meditation, then we attain one-pointedness of mind, and then the sensual desire is no more a hindrance. It is cut down to such a low extent that you are not troubled by it. 285. Cut off your affection as one plucks with the hand an autumn lotus. Cultivate only the path to peace, to nibbana, as made known by the Exalted One. This affection is a source of suffering, but to cut it off, it's difficult unless you understand the urgency. If you understand the urgency that you don't cut off your affection, your attachments, when death comes to you very soon, you will have a lot of suffering. All those things that you attach to turns the opposite, becomes your enemy, becomes your very obstacle to happiness. 286. Here shall I live during the rains, here in winter and summer. Thus thinks the fool. He does not realize the danger. Earlier we read one verse where the sleeping village is swept away by the flood. So in the same way, these most worldly people, they make plans, long-term plans. During the vasa, the rains, I'm going to stay here. During the winter, I'm going to go there. During the summer, I'm going to go for my here and there. So he does not realize that death is just very close by. Any time will touch him on the shoulder. 287. As a great flood carries away a sleeping village, just so death seizes and carries away a man with a grasping mind, doting on his children and cattle. 288. For one who is assailed by the destroyer, there is no protection by kinsmen. None there are to save him, no sons, nor father, nor relatives. 289. Realizing this fact, that the wise man, restrained by morality, hasten to clear the path leading to Nibbana. So here we see again the great flood carries away a sleeping village. So a person is attached to the children and the property, death will carry away. And 288, this destroyer is death. When death comes, nobody can save you, no relative can save you. So if you understand this, quickly practice the path of letting go. Okay, we shall end here for tonight. Anything to discuss? You can see from the verses how this Dhammapada is so popular. There's so many beautiful words of wisdom in it.
But recently many been talking about path and fruition. So can Bhante share the distinction between the two, and then about path and fruition is one lifetime or could be recently happened.
This path and fruition, I start with the first. To attain the first path is synonymous as attaining right view. The Buddha says in the suttas that all Aryans have right view, meaning Aryan right view, not worldly right view. Aryan right view means understanding the Dhamma, basically the Four Noble Truths. And as I mentioned before, to attain this right view, there are two conditions. One is the voice of another teaching you the Dhamma, and secondly, you pay proper attention. From this you can see right view can only be attained by listening to the Dhamma. It is not attained by meditation. Meditation cannot bring you to right view, which means meditation cannot bring you to the first path. And the sutta says in the Samyutta Nikaya, I think 25.1, the sutta says after you have attained the first path from understanding the Dhamma, then it takes some time for that wisdom to ripen, so to speak. It takes time for that wisdom to ripen. And then the latest, the wisdom will ripen at the moment of death. So between the time a person attains the first path and his death, maybe a few years later or many years later, during that period, it will ripen into fruit, sotapanna. And when it ripens into fruit, the three fetters fall away. What are these three fetters? One is identity view, Sakaya Ditti. That means when the identity view falls away, then he does not identify the self with the body and the mind, the five aggregates. An ordinary worldling, he always thinks that the body and the mind is I, is mine, is myself. But this person who has attained Sotapanna, the first fruition, he understands that this body and the mind is impermanent, so it cannot be self. Although he still has the self, only the Arahant has no self. Then the second factor that falls away is Sila Bhatta Paramasa, attachment to Sila or rules, and Vata. Vata means religious observance, religious practice, anything to do with religion. And then, so he is no more attached to it. That means even though he practices Sila, he is not too attached to Sila. He doesn't make a show of it. He understands the purpose of Sila. And the Vata. And then the third one is doubt. Doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. He has no more doubts. So when a person attains this Sotapanna, the fruition, these three factors fall away. So that is how to become a Sotapanna, basically by getting right view. And as I mentioned, that is only by listening to the Dhamma. Now to attain the second path, the difference between the first fruition, this Sotapanna, and the second fruition, the Sakadagamin, the difference is that both have eliminated the three fetters, but the second fruition has decreased this greed, hatred and delusion, or lust, hatred and delusion, has reduced. Now to reduce this lust, hatred and delusion, He needs some samadhi. And this samadhi is not perfect samadhi. Perfect samadhi in the Noble Eightfold Path means the 4 jhanas. So, since he needs some samadhi, that means he needs either the first jhana, or the second jhana, or the third jhana. So when a person attains one of these 3 jhanas, that's one-pointedness of mind reduces his hindrances. So much so that this greed, hatred and delusion are reduced. So that is the way to attain the second path and second fruition. So the second path, he also needs understanding of the Dhamma plus some samadhi, meditation, and basically samatha meditation. So in the same way, he attains the second path, and then it takes some time for the second path to turn into fruition. And when it turns into fruition, then the greed, hatred and delusion are reduced. So he needs either the first jhana or second jhana or the third jhana. That is for Sakadagamin. Now for the third fruition, Anagamin, a person who has attained Anagamin has eliminated 5 lower factors. That means the 3 earlier factors we mentioned, plus 2 more. And that is, what is the other 2? Sensual desire and ill will, I think. So he has eliminated sensual desire and ill will. And for a person to become an Anagamin, he needs the 4 jhanas, because the sutta says an Anagamin, a Sotapanna and a Sakadagamin, they have perfect sila but not perfect samadhi. Anagamin has perfect sila and perfect samadhi. That means Anagamin has the 4 jhanas. And the same way, the Anagamin, first he attains the third path, and later the path will turn into fruition. And then for the Arahant, has perfect sila, samadhi and panya. So in addition to perfect sila and perfect samadhi, an Arahant has perfect panya, perfect wisdom. And that comes from destroying the asavas. This destroying of asavas and becoming liberated, a lot of people think is wisdom. This liberation or attainment of arahanthood is not defined as attainment of wisdom, but is defined as the destruction of the asavas. As I mentioned before, the asavas means the uncontrolled mental outflows. Basically, at the deepest level is the flow of consciousness. Because when the consciousness flows, it creates the world. As I mentioned before, consciousness always comes with nama rupa, mentality and materiality, which means the world. When consciousness arises, the world arises. So when a person has destroyed the asavas, he has destroyed the tendency of the mind to flow. So when an arahant passes away, because he has destroyed the tendency of the mind to flow, the consciousness stops flowing. So that's why an arahant is not reborn. As I mentioned also in the suttas, the Buddha confirmed by saying that the consciousness of the arahant will never take rebirth again. So that is the arahant. Also in the same way, the arahant first must attain the path, and then it turns to fruition. So it takes time, not like the Abhidhamma says. The Abhidhamma says when you attain the path, immediately it turns to fruit. If a person attains the path and immediately the next conscious moment it turns to fruit, that means a lay person can never do dana to a path attainer. That's enough. Cannot do dana to a path attainer. By the time you want to do dana to the path attainer, he's already become a fruit attainer. But in the suttas, the Buddha says it is possible to do dana to a path attainer. It is possible to do dana to a fruition attainer. Both also possible. That's why this Abhidhamma teaching contradicts the suttas. Because a lot of people are not well versed, not knowledgeable about the suttas, that you don't see the contradictions in these later books. Okay? You can ask about any topic not related to this, what we are discussing tonight.
Okay, since jhana is so important in the path of cultivation, and they share with us some information about jhana, first, second, third, and fourth.
This attainment of the jhanas, when we practice meditation, we are trying to discipline the mind, to control the mind, which is so hard to control. To understand the meaning of meditation and how to control the mind, the Buddha gave a simile. And this simile, the Buddha talked about a hunter who caught 6 animals. What are these 6 animals? A bird, for example, the eagle, and then a monkey, and a snake, and a crocodile, and a hyena, and a dog. So these 6 animals, the hunter tied a rope around the neck of each of these 6 animals. And these 6 ropes, he tied them together into a knot, and he let the animals loose. What happens? The eagle wants to fly up into the air. The monkey wants to climb up the tree. The snake wants to go into the hole to hide. The crocodile wants to go into the river. The hyena wants to go up the hill. And the dog wants to go into town to look for food. So these 6 animals are pulling in 6 different directions. And the Buddha says this is just like the everyday mind. Our everyday mind is being pulled by the 6 sense objects, namely sights. Sights or forms want us to see, sounds want us to hear, smells want us to smell, taste want us to taste, touch want us to notice, and thoughts also want us to think. So these 6 objects are pulling us, and at any time, whichever is the strongest will pull our attention. Just like these 6 animals, when you let them loose, the strongest one will pull the others. And when it's tired, another will pull and the others have to follow. And then when that one is tired, another will pull and they have to follow. So like now you're listening to the Dhamma talk. If suddenly outside there's a car horn suddenly, so loud, your attention is pulled there. Or if suddenly a mosquito bites you, and then you feel the itch or the pain, then your attention goes there. So our attention is always pulled from one object to another. And this is the everyday mind, and this you can also call momentary concentration. Momentary concentration, changing from one object to another, is what we practice every day, every moment. Even a mad person has momentary concentration because he keeps thinking of this and keep thinking of that. Even when you're sleeping, you have momentary concentration. When you're dreaming, you are mindful of your dream. All the time you're mindful of something, one object after another. That is ordinary mind, the momentary concentration. Now the Buddha says, for the hunter to discipline the 6 animals, what must he do? These 6 ropes he must not let loose. The 6 ropes he must tie around a stout post. And then when he ties the 6 ropes to the stout post, the animals, even if they want to fly up or to climb the tree, they can only go round and round the post, round and round until they are tired. And then they will sleep quietly beside the post. So in the same way, the Buddha says, if we want to discipline our mind, we must tie our attention to only one object. The mind is so used to going out through the 6 sense doors that it doesn't like to stay to one object. But that is the only way to discipline the mind. It's like a small boy, he wants to always go outdoor to play. Now you tell him you've been naughty, Now you stay in the room. You cannot watch TV. You cannot play the computer. You cannot play with your friend. You just stay in your room. The boy won't be happy. So in the same way, when we try to discipline our mind, it's not happy. So when we try to meditate, to put our attention only on one object. And the Buddha says that his method of meditation, mentioned in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha says, before enlightenment, the Tathagata practiced Anapanasati. And even after enlightenment, the Tathagata, the Buddha, practiced Anapanasati, which is mindfulness of the breath. So when we practice Anapanasati, we are mindful of the breath going in to our body, down to our abdomen, and coming up again. So we just pay attention. We pull our attention to the breath, the movement of the breath. And this paying attention to the breath is not like what the Visuddhimagga says, pay attention to the tip of your nose or the top of your lips. No, it's paying attention to the breath body. The Buddha says, the breath body. So we are paying attention to the breath itself. So if you want, you can follow the breath. When you pay attention to the breath, the mind will run off, maybe to your office. You're thinking of your office, or you're thinking of your family, or you're thinking, there, close the window. So when it goes away, we have to pull it back to our breath. Every time it runs away, we pull it back to the breath. And that is called vitakka. Thought directed to your breath and only your breath. So if it goes, your straying mind tells you, wow, today very hot, that you don't bother, you just pull it back to your breath. So, or you feel my leg is giving me pain, also don't bother, pull it back to your breath. Unless the pain is so extreme that it is a nuisance, your attention is always pulled to your pain, in which case you shift your leg. Otherwise you just pay attention to your breath. So you keep paying attention to your breath. So every time it runs away, you pull it back to your breath. That is vitakka. And after you pull it back to your breath, you sustain it on your breath. That is called vichara. Vichara is translated as thought sustained on your breath. That is vichara. So you keep practicing, and it takes 1 or 2 years before you can have some skill to stay with the breath. That's why meditation is very difficult. For some people, even 1 or 2 years also cannot. So you keep practicing, always pulling back to your breath. Pulling back to your breath and staying with your breath. Pulling back to your breath and staying with your breath. So only use these two things, vitakka and vichara. So of course you must sit comfortably and not too hot a place. In a place where you're not disturbed by mosquitoes and insects and all that. So you are able to meditate properly. So if you are able to follow your breath and sustain it on your breath, and then slowly your attention, your mind becomes one-pointed. When it becomes one-pointed, piti and sukha will arise at the same time as ekagata. Ekagata is one-pointedness of mind. So when this delight arises, delight means you are delighted that your mind has calmed down and your mind is one-pointed. Sukha means the bliss. You feel the bliss that you have never experienced before. It's very blissful. So when this bliss arises, you are delighted, and your mind is one-pointed. So these three factors, when they arise together, these 5 factors, when they arise together, you attain the first jhana. Nowadays, some meditation teachers talk about the light and all that. If the light was important, the Buddha would have mentioned it as a factor, as a jhana factor. But the Buddha never mentioned light as a jhana factor. Only these 5 things are important. Light is not important. Light, whether light comes or light goes, we don't pay attention. When your mind is one-pointed, it's natural that the light will come. But then it's not permanent, it will go away. Whether it comes or it goes away, you don't pay attention. If you pay attention to the light, you are missing your object. You are changing your object. You are not practicing Anapanasati. Anapanasati means you are meditating on your breath and only your breath. Only one object. And you don't change that object. That one object represents the pose you tie your attention to. So there is a way you attain the first jhana. So after you attain the first jhana, because it's a difficult state to attain, you can lose it easily. You can lose it easily. Even if you attain it for a short while, and you lose it. Because you don't have the kung fu. So it takes time to develop the kung fu, where you can sustain your first jhana. So after you are able to sustain your first jhana, it becomes stronger and stronger. And all these 5 factors also become stronger. So when your piti and sukha are strong enough, then you change your attention from your breath, by which time the breath will become finer and finer and less noticeable. Then you change your attention to piti and sukha. You put all your attention on piti and sukha. When you change your attention to piti and sukha, then you have thrown away the vitaka and vichara. When vitaka and vichara goes away, then you enter the second jhana. So in the same way, you make your mind more and more still. You enter one jhana after another. Okay? Okay, shall we end here?